There is a moment in every genuine transformation that nobody warns you about. Not the self-help books. Not the motivational speakers with their frameworks and their blueprints and their confident assurances that change is just a decision away. Not the people who have supposedly figured it all out and want to show you exactly how they did it. The moment when you realize you cannot go back. Not because going back is difficult, because going back is impossible. The door isn't locked, it's gone. The path behind you has collapsed. The person you used to be no longer exists in any form that you could inhabit again. And standing in the rubble of everything you once called your life, you are forced to confront a question so terrifying that most people spend their entire existence running from it. Who am I when I stop performing who everyone needs me to be? The quiet knowing. You have felt it coming for a while now. Not a dramatic crisis. Not a single identifiable event you could point to and say, that's when it started. Just a quiet, persistent knowing that something beneath the surface of your daily life has fundamentally shifted. That the life you are living belongs, in some essential way, to someone else. The relationships that once felt comfortable now feel like obligations you cannot remember agreeing to. The career that gave you identity now feels like a costume, something you put on in the morning and take off at night, and neither moment feels like the real thing. The routines that structured your days feel less like foundation and more like a prison you built with your own hands, brick by careful brick, over many years. And here is what makes this moment so excruciating. Nothing is technically wrong. By every external measure, your life might look completely fine. Stable, perhaps even enviable. Your friends don't understand what you're troubled by. Your family thinks you're going through a phase. Your own mind keeps insisting that you should be grateful, that you're overthinking, that you should just return to normal. But normal is gone. Because normal was built on a foundation that has been quietly rotting from the inside for years, and now the collapse is happening whether you are ready for it or not. What Jung saw. Carl Jung spent decades sitting with people exactly like you. People who arrived unable to explain what was wrong, because nothing was wrong in any way that conventional psychology could recognize. They weren't clinically depressed. They weren't anxious about anything specific. They weren't broken, traumatized, or failing at life by any visible measure. They were dying. Not physically. Psychologically. The self they had constructed to navigate the world, to earn love, to secure belonging, to survive the accumulated demands of family and culture and expectation, that self was disintegrating. And the experience was indistinguishable from falling apart. Jung's colleagues called it a midlife crisis. They called it regression, neurosis, failure to adapt. Jung called it something entirely different. He called it individuation. And he understood something that most people never realize until they are standing exactly where you are standing right now. The disintegration you are experiencing is not a sign that something has gone wrong. It is a sign that something has finally gone right. The psyche has decided that the cost of maintaining the false self has become too high. The debt has come due. And the part of you that knows who you actually are, the self that has been waiting beneath all the performance, all the accommodation, all the quiet ongoing betrayal of your own truth, has taken over. It is not asking for your permission. It is not negotiating with your fear. It is dismantling every structure that was built on a lie. The collapse is the point. Most people fundamentally misunderstand what transformation actually is. They think it means adding something. More discipline. Better habits, a new morning routine, a clearer vision of where they're going. They approach their own evolution like a renovation project. Keep the foundation, just update the fixtures. But Jung saw something different. Real transformation is not additive. It is subtractive. It does not build a better version of the old self. It destroys the old self entirely, because the old self was never real to begin with. It was a survival strategy, a collection of adaptations assembled under pressure, a mask that learned to smile so convincingly that it forgot there was a face underneath. And when the psyche decides it is time for the mask to come off, it does not come off gently. It is ripped away. And the person wearing it experiences that ripping as death, because in a very real sense it is the death of who you thought you were, the death of who everyone told you to be, the death of the identity you constructed to keep yourself safe in a world that never felt entirely safe. This is why you cannot point to one thing that is wrong. Because everything is wrong. Not the circumstances, the foundation. The ground you built your life on has been dissolving for years, and you have been running so fast, achieving so much, pleasing so many people that you didn't notice. Until the running stopped working. Until the achievements stopped meaning anything. Until the people you were pleasing started feeling like strangers you owed a debt you never agreed to. The liminal space. Jung had a name for where you are right now. He called it the liminal space, the threshold between what was and what has not yet become. And he was brutally honest about what happens there. In the liminal space, nothing makes sense. Your old identity no longer fits, but your new identity has not yet formed. You cannot go back because you have seen too much. You cannot move forward because you do not yet know who you are moving toward. The maps you once used to navigate the world have turned to smoke in your hand. The people who knew you no longer fully recognize you. And the person you used to see in the mirror has become a stranger wearing your face. This is where most people break. Not because the transformation is too difficult. Because the uncertainty is too unbearable. The ego, that part of you that needs to know, to control, to predict, to keep things safe and manageable, interprets the liminal space as annihilation. It floods you with fear. It replays every worst-case scenario on a loop. It whispers that you are losing your mind, that you are making a catastrophic mistake, that you should go back before it's too late. But here is what Jung understood that the ego cannot see. The liminal space is not where you lose yourself. It is where you find yourself, but only if you can endure the not knowing. Only if you can sit in the void without running. Only if you can let the old self die completely instead of trying to resuscitate a corpse and call it healing. The relationships that cannot survive you. There is a particular cruelty built into genuine transformation that almost nobody talks about. The people you love will not always survive who you are becoming. Not because they are bad people. Not because they wish you harm. Because the version of you they built their relationship with is dying. And they will experience your transformation as a loss, as a betrayal, as a threat to the system that has kept everything stable and predictable. Think about the relationships in your life that have suddenly become unbearable, the ones that were fine for years and now feel like slowly drowning. Nothing changed in those relationships. You changed. You became conscious of dynamics you had been tolerating unconsciously. You started noticing the subtle ways you shrink, accommodate, apologize for existing. The way you perform gratitude for crumbs. The way you abandon your own needs to keep other people comfortable. And now that you see it, you cannot unsee it. Staying in those relationships now requires a form of self-betrayal that your psyche will no longer permit. The old you could do it. The old you was built for it. The old you had been trained since childhood to sacrifice truth for belonging, to trade authenticity for approval, to become whatever was needed to avoid abandonment. But the new self, the one emerging from the wreckage, cannot make those trades anymore. And here is the part that makes this unbearable. The people who benefited from your self-abandonment will not understand. They will frame your growth as selfishness. They will call your boundaries cruelty. They will label your voice aggressive because they are accustomed to your silence. They will mourn the old you like a death because for them it is one. You will feel guilty. You will feel the old programming activate with full force. The voice that says you are responsible for other people's feelings, that you are hurting them, that you should just go back to how things were. But you cannot. Because going back would require you to unsee what you have seen, to unfeel what you have felt, to become unconscious again. And that door is closed. The grief you cannot skip. Here is where most people make a devastating mistake. They try to jump straight from the death to the rebirth. They want the transformation without the mourning. They want the new life without fully experiencing the loss of the old one. They treat their own disintegration as a problem to solve rather than a passage to endure. But Jung was adamant about this. You cannot bypass the grief. The old self, the one that is dying, deserves to be mourned. Not because it was entirely wrong or bad or broken. Because it did its best with what it had. It protected you. It got you through. It found moments of beauty and connection and meaning inside the compromise. And now it has to go. And that loss is real, even if it is ultimately for your liberation. So if you are grieving right now, grieving relationships, grieving a version of yourself, grieving a life that felt comfortable even though it was not true, that grief is not a sign that you are doing this wrong. It is a sign that you are doing it completely. That you are honoring what was even as you release it. This is perhaps the most confusing part of all. The old life was not all dysfunction. There were genuine moments of joy, of love, of meaning. And recognizing that the beauty was real, while also recognizing that the compromise was killing you, holding both of those truths simultaneously, that is not weakness. That is the most sophisticated form of emotional honesty a human being is capable of. It means you have stopped splitting reality into all good or all bad. It means you have stopped needing things to be simple. It means you are seeing completely. And complete seeing is the foundation of the life you are about to build. The void. After the death. After the grief. After the relationships fall and the identity crumbles and the ground disappears beneath your feet. There is the void. Jung did not call it that to be dramatic. He called it that because it is accurate. There is a period after the old life dies and before the new life takes shape where you are genuinely nothing. Not the old you. Not the new you. Just raw, unformed, open. And this void terrifies people more than anything, because the ego has nothing to hold on to. No identity to perform. No role to play. No script to follow. If you are in this space right now, experiencing this psychological free fall where you don't recognize your own life and you don't know what is coming next, Jung would want you to know something important. This void is not emptiness. It is potential. It is the psychic clearing space for something that could not have grown inside the old structures. The void feels like nothing because what is forming has not yet taken shape. But it is forming beneath the surface in the depths you cannot yet see. The new self is assembling itself from the pieces of who you actually are rather than who you were told to be. And here is what changes everything if you can let it in. The new life that emerges from this process is not something you have to build. It is something you have to allow. The old life was constructed, assembled deliberately from external expectations and survival strategies and approved blueprints for how to exist. But the new life does not work that way. It emerges. It comes from within. It is the self finally expressing what was always there, but could not surface while the ego's construction was taking up all the available space. This is what makes the process so unlike anything you have experienced before. You are not planning your way into the next chapter. You are surrendering into it. Not passive surrender. Jung was clear about that. Active surrender. You actively let go of controlling the outcome. You actively release the need to know what comes next. You actively choose to trust a process that your rational mind cannot map or predict. And that active surrendering is harder than any amount of effortful building, because it requires you to tolerate uncertainty at a level the ego finds absolutely unbearable. The fear is the ego's last stand. There will come a moment, probably soon, when the fear becomes almost unbearable. The terror that you are making a catastrophic mistake, that you are going to end up alone, that you will lose everything and gain nothing, that maybe the old life was not so bad, that maybe you should just go back, that maybe this whole transformation is just an elaborate form of self-destruction dressed up as growth. Jung documented this pattern in nearly every person undergoing deep transformation. Right before the breakthrough, the fear becomes almost unbearable. Right before the old life fully releases, the pull to go back becomes strongest. Right before the new self emerges, the doubt becomes loudest. This is not a coincidence. This is the pattern. The intensity of the resistance is proportional to the magnitude of the transformation. If the fear is enormous, it is because what is coming is enormous. The ego knows this. That is why it is fighting so hard. It knows the old identity is dying, and it cannot stop the process. So it weaponizes fear. It floods you with worst-case scenarios. It replays every story of people who changed and ended up worse. It whispers that you are not strong enough, not ready, not equipped to survive this transition. But here is what the ego cannot see, and Jung could. The people who pushed through that fear, who sat with the terror and did not run back to the old life, every single one of them arrived somewhere they could not have imagined from the other side of the threshold. Not because the universe rewarded their bravery. Because the self, freed from the ego's construction, had access to possibilities that the ego's limited vision could never conceive. The old self could only imagine variations of what it already knew. The self can create what has never existed in your life before. What emerges? Jung found something that matters deeply right now. The people who go through this transition, who allow the old life to die completely, don't just change. They become unrecognizable to the people who knew them before. Not physically, psychologically. The way they move through the world shift. The energy they carry shift. The things they tolerate. The people they attract. The way they respond to conflict, to intimacy, to challenge. All of it changes at such a fundamental level that people from the old life literally cannot reconcile the new person with the one they knew. Some people in your life will experience this as loss. They will grieve the old you. They will ask what happened to you. They will try to pull you back into old patterns because the new you makes them uncomfortable. And you will feel the pull. You will feel the guilt. The old programming that says you are responsible for other people's comfort will activate with full force. But you will also feel something else. A quiet, unshakable knowing that going back would be a betrayal of everything you just survived to become. And that knowing is the self speaking. Not the ego with its fear and its comfort-seeking and its desperate clinging to familiar suffering. The self, the part of you that knows what you are beneath every adaptation, every performance, every compromise you made to keep belonging. That part is speaking now. And it is saying the same thing it has been saying for months, perhaps years, that you kept drowning out with busyness and people-pleasing and the noise of a life built for someone you never actually were. It is time. Time to stop pretending the old life still fit. Time to stop apologizing for outgrowing what you have outgrown. Time to stop waiting for permission from people who will never give it, because your transformation threatens the system they depend on. Time to stop bargaining with a version of reality that your own psyche has already rejected. What Jung would tell you now. If Jung could sit across from you at this exact moment, at this exact threshold, feeling what you are feeling, terrified of what you are terrified of, he would not offer you comfort. Comfort would be dishonest at this stage. He would offer you recognition. He would tell you that what you are going through is not a breakdown. It is a breakthrough that looks like a breakdown from the inside. He would tell you that everything crumbling was supposed to crumble, not because it was worthless, because it was temporary. It was scaffolding. It held you up while you were too young, too wounded, too unconscious to hold yourself. And now you don't need the scaffolding anymore. Not because you are healed or finished or resolved. Because you have become strong enough to stand in your own truth without external structures propping you up. He would tell you that the relationship's ending needed to end. Not because the people were bad. Because the dynamic was built on a version of you that no longer exists. Maintaining those relationships would require you to resurrect the old self, to perform the old patterns, to betray the new truth emerging inside you. Some relationships will survive the transition, the ones built on who you actually are rather than who you were performing to be. Those will deepen in ways you cannot yet imagine. But the ones built on the performance have to go. And you know which ones they are. You have known for longer than you have been willing to admit. He would tell you that the hollowness you feel in the career, the lifestyle, the daily patterns, that hollowness is not a malfunction. It is accurate perception. Those things were designed by the old self for the old self's purposes. And those purposes no longer align with what is alive in you now. This doesn't mean you have to blow everything up tomorrow. But it means you have to stop pretending the hollowness isn't real. It means you have to start making decisions from the new truth rather than the old fear. Even small ones. Especially small ones. Because every choice made from your actual truth, rather than your adapted patterns, is a declaration to the psyche that the new self is welcome here. He would tell you that the void stops feeling like emptiness once you stop fighting it, that the uncertainty stops feeling like chaos once you stop trying to control it, that the loss stops feeling like punishment once you recognize it as release. This doesn't mean it stops being hard. It means the hardness changes quality. From the hardness of resistance, fighting what is happening, clinging to what is dying, to the hardness of creation. The difficulty of building something real. The challenge of learning to move through the world as someone who is not performing anymore. And then he would tell you something that might be the most important thing you hear through this entire process. The truest thing. You are not falling apart. You are falling into yourself. The old life is ending. You already know this. You have known it for longer than you have been willing to admit. Every piece that is breaking was never really you. Every structure collapsing was built on ground that was never truly yours. Every relationship ending was rooted in a performance that was costing you your soul. And the fact that it is all coming down now, the fact that you cannot stop it, the fact that your own psyche is dismantling everything you thought you needed to survive, that is not evidence that you are broken. It is evidence that you are ready. Ready to live a life that is not built from fear. Not constructed from other people's blueprint. Not maintained by self-abandonment and performance and the slow, quiet betrayal of everything real inside you. Ready for an actual life. Your life. The one that has been waiting beneath all the scaffolding, all the adaptation, all the years of being who everyone else needed you to be. That life is waiting for you on the other side of this threshold. And the only thing between you and it is your willingness to let the old one end. So let it end. Not with violence. Not with bitterness. Not with burning bridges for the satisfaction of watching them burn. Let it end with the same gravity and tenderness you would bring to any death that mattered. Because it does matter. The old life mattered. The old self mattered. Honoring what was while releasing it completely, that is the final act of the person you used to be. The most courageous thing they ever did. The last gift they gave you before they were gone. The old life is ending. Let it end. And then let yourself begin. You don't need to have answers yet. You don't need to know what comes next. You don't need to see the whole path. You don't need to have it figured out. You only need to stay. Stay in the void a little longer. Let the new self form at its own pace. Trust the process your rational mind cannot map. Trust the part of you that knew, long before you were ready to admit it, that something had to change. When you are ready, you will begin. Not because a script told you to. Not because someone else decided it was time. Because the truth inside you finally became louder than the fear. That is the only signal you have ever needed. And you are already hearing it.